My name's Bolduc. I'm a makerspace facilitator in our Tinker Tank department. The Tinker Tank focuses on a whole bunch of interesting, fun ways to integrate all realms of STEAM. Used to primarily focus on like engineering activities, but now we incorporate all sorts of things. So my day-to-day is making cool things and trying to turn it into activities. Pacific Science Center loves emphasizing people being curious and how we can nurture that through different types of activities or exhibits or whatnot. So we just try to support that mission in everything we do. So within our makerspace is where all of our equipment lives. We've got a Glowforge laser cutter, and we have about 9 or 10 3D printers. They're Dremel. We have silhouette vinyl cutters, and a sewing and serger machine, and a spinning wheel, soldering irons, small scale wood shop, small scale technology shop to try and fix electronics and whatnot, jewelry making. Pretty much every tool and activity you can imagine is available for staff right now. Mm-hmm. On the floor, we host a range of facilitated versus unfacilitated activities. So we have a sushi Lego belt that rotates cups of Legos all around, so anybody can build whatever creation they're interested in. And we have Rigamajig, and since I've joined and since before I joined the team actually, there's rotating monthly activities that emphasize design cycle thinking. So this month's activity is cardboard couture. So we've got all cardboard and compostable materials, and we provide a few equipment items like cardboard shears or trauma shears to cut through the cardboard. We've got some safe slicing tools with ceramic blades rather than X-Acto knives, and we're stepping back a bit on this activity and seeing just what wearable items people can create. So we have a youth development cohort on site. It's called Discovery Corps, and they work with high school teens who essentially apply for a job here, and that job is to have a position within the cohort and go through the youth development curriculum, so it's a paid position. And they do learn some tasks like being on the floor, interacting with guests, sometimes facilitating things like our animal care facilities, tide pool, butterfly house, but they're never responsible for it because they are in a development cohort after all. They're just trying to learn these skills. And then they also have curriculum within their office where it's just the cohort itself learning various professional and scientific skills.
Very cool. Yeah, that's great. And so you said these are like high school kids, mm-hmm. And like how long is this program? Are these kids that
They can be in it for all 4 years.
Okay.
It was only recently restarted after COVID, so it's not as formal of we've got this cohort of freshmen and sophomores and juniors and seniors. It's kind of a mixed bag, but every summer thus far since reopening they've accepted new students into the cohort.
That's very cool. And is the Tinker Tank also open to just kids that are coming into the Science Center, or is it really aimed specifically at these programs, or how does that work?
We would like to serve everybody. So Tinker Tank is still very much in its prototyping stage. Throughout the next 3 years, we're going to be going through major building renovations where the goal is to become a community makerspace where public can walk in or get a membership to access all of the tools that staff are currently using. To start prototyping, opening that up to youth, we're starting with Discovery Corps, inviting them in sometimes. They're getting pretty good with our 3D printers. We also have a cohort coming in from the downtown school nearby who comes in every Friday afternoon, and they're learning various tools too. And we've told them all, we made it clear, hey, we are guinea pigging all of you in different ways, and they're totally cool with that. They just come in interested, and then as we figure out what works and what doesn't, we might invite a public cohort in maybe in the mornings or something, so it's not as chaotic and we can really focus on that. ARIS is really cool. So it stands for Amateur Radio on the International Space Station. It is a program hosted by NASA that grants educational organizations to make a contact, a 10-minute radio contact via amateur radio with actual astronauts on the ISS. And it sponsors these organizations to do so for free. You may have to pay for things like equipment, but overall the contact, you write a proposal, They choose whether they want to select your organization based on how much you want to teach students about amateur radio, and then you're good to go.
And who's the audience for this?
So it really depends on the educational organization. Typically, it's going to be schools, and primarily even public schools. So their audience is going to be students at the school. Maybe they invite their parents or nearby schools to come watch the contact, since it's a big and exciting event. For our contact, since we are a little bit different than a school, we're going to have our Discovery Corps Youth Development Group be the students that benefit and that are actually talking to the astronauts. We're going to be inviting our summer camps that have followed a related curriculum to maybe view some of the activities that DC, which is Discovery Corps, are doing with Tinker Tank, and if DC feels comfortable, they could facilitate those activities later with camps. And then in the audience, attending this big event is going to be the public. And people interested in amateur radio already, people who have no idea what it is, but they think they want to be interested in it. So we'd really like to explore as many avenues of populations interested as possible.
And is this also going to be live streamed or
Yeah.
available?
So it's going to be in our lecture space, which has live streamed multiple events before, so we're very comfortable with just whatever we put up on the screen is also going to be sent out to maybe our YouTube channel or other avenues of live streaming, and that's going to be through our theaters department. It's going to be a very short process, so
Yeah, okay.
I can walk you through what the event leading up will be as well.
Sure, yeah.
So let's say you're an audience member, you just bought a ticket, you're going to be in an IMAX theater, so all these movie theater seats and this giant screen up in front. There's going to be some guest lecturers sitting up there, ready to talk a little bit about their work, some related to amateur radio, maybe emergency communications, satellite communications. We're trying to gather a diverse group of lecturers there. They're going to give their presentation maybe with some slides up on the IMAX screen, and then we're going to discuss what ARIS is. We're going to introduce the Discovery Corps program and why we've selected them. And then the whole audience is going to watch them use a radio to talk to astronauts. They'll be able to hear the students asking questions. They'll be able to hear the astronauts' response. And then we'll say, if you're interested, here's how we did it. Here's some resources. Please come join us. Because Tinker Tank is all about building, tinkering, making, the activities that we are going to offer are going to focus on that. So we are going to offer building a tape measure antenna, which members of West Seattle ARC taught me how to do, and then we use that antenna for direction finding with the fox hunt. So we're going to allow the teens to also do a fox hunt around the Science Center. We're going to introduce other types of antennas like arrow shaft antennas, because that's a material that we'd love to see if we can source locally and have them, cut the arrow shafts themselves to the proper size and whatnot. And so they're really going to get the hands-on experience of building smaller kits like attenuator kits or whatnot, rather than an entire radio, but then they could work on fixing a radio. If we purposely break a part of it, they have to kind of take it apart and identify the components, and then practice small-scale satellite contacts where we're not relying on the astronauts to answer, but mostly speaking through repeaters because I have a license so that they can operate under that. Very funny story. I find it funny. I really do not like using social media, and I barely used Instagram, but there was one week where I was just on my Explore page and the most random videos kept popping up, and I saw a video of a guy holding an antenna, kind of turning it, and I was like, what could this possibly be? This is funny. So I read the caption, and it was, did you know that, you can apply for your educational organization to host an ARIS contact? And I was like, what is this? So I just started looking it up and getting into this rabbit hole of, oh, the proposal window is open right now. I can write a proposal and we can talk to ISS astronauts. That is all I need to know. So I went to my manager and I was like, I have a crazy idea. I don't even understand it all, but I feel comfortable writing a proposal. And she said, okay, go for it. And then people just kept saying yes to me, and I still don't really know why. And so the more I learned about amateur radio was just so that I could write some sort of decent proposal based off of an Instagram video. And now I'm back to not using Instagram. I crammed it. I think it took me maybe a week or two of just going through. I was doing it at work, outside of work. And it was fun. It was really interesting to learn so many acronyms and numbers and whatnot, but that worked for me to do it quickly.
Yeah,
And
that's
now when I see it in
incredible.
documents, I'm like, oh, I know what all that stuff is. Made my first contact, I mean, I didn't really, but I was there for it, and Eric allowed me to talk on under his license, but it was a successful ISS contact. So when they came in and they taught me how to build the tape measure antenna, we did the fox hunt. After that, we used Eric's aeroshaft antenna, and the ISS was just passing over this narrow pathway between the Science Center and the park next door, and that's exactly where we made the contact, and it was cool.
Yeah. And I don't know if you said this earlier, but what's your call sign?
It's Kilo Kilo 7 Romeo Lima Lima.
Excellent.
I just changed it for vanity, so I was like, I haven't said that in a bit.
Cool. Very good. Okay. And I guess have you done any contacts that aren't a satellite bounce? Have you done any?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So I did a couple contacts with Eric's daughter, Lauren.
Nice.
We did it just on two sides of a door here at the Science Center. We also have done it off of a repeater. And I do intend to join both West Seattle ArcsNet on Mondays and the Youth on AirNet on Thursdays. I just keep forgetting to bring my equipment home for some reason. But one part of the proposal, you're required to work with an amateur radio club. So I just went on ARRL's website and just looked up local amateur radio clubs. I think I chose the top 3 that looked the most established. I went through everybody's websites, and West Seattle Arc really stuck out to me, but I wanted to just make sure we had any backup options. So I reached out to, I think, 3, and I did not hear back from 1. So I started seeing what avenues various radio clubs could help us with, because it seemed that the 2 I'd been talking to had different strengths. And so after just working through the proposal, getting approved, after West Seattle Arc had already done so much for us in helping me learn about amateur radio very quickly and get the license, it was apparent that they were committed, that they were happy to be involved, that our interests aligned very well, so it was an obvious choice to keep moving forward. We haven't had our contact date selected, and that makes it very difficult to know when to start curriculum, because not only is Tinker Tank providing hands-on activities, DC also has formal curriculum that they'll be delivering, all related to space weather and satellite communications and just any really topic that they felt was important to pull in, as well as our camps department that will be somewhat involved in the event and attending and really shadowing the DC youth. They've got a Mission to Mars camp, and so they have to know when to start that so that the end of the camp is attending the event. And that's really difficult to know when to start everything when you don't know when it ends. But in the meantime, we've been very busy, so things have been moving fast in the sense that we had to develop an equipment plan and submit it to ARIS and say, this is the equipment we're going to be using, this is how we're going to be using it. We had to meet with the theaters department since it'll be hosted in a theater, and then we found out we had to actually meet with the facilities department because they're in charge of the roof. So just lots of meetings and figuring out how to get all the information we need, as well as checking in with ARIS every 2 weeks to describe to them how we've started delivering content and what our plan is for how to really space that out at a good frequency. So it's been busy in decision making, and then as soon as we get our contact date, that's when it'll start to pick up even more, when we're like, okay, we're in this month, that means we can start now and do an activity once a week or whatnot.
Do you know when we'll find out?
We don't. So we get 2 mentors. We get a technical mentor to help with equipment and technical aspects, and we get an educational ambassador mentor who has been the main point of contact for their own educational organizations, successful ARIS Contact. And I reached out to that ambassador and said, how long did it take you to find out? And she was like, really short notice. They tell you what month that your contact will be in, but there's no confirmation that they'll tell you within a specific time frame, and then as soon as they tell you your month, 1 week before your contact, they'll tell you your contact.
Okay.
If that makes
Great.
sense.
So, like, it could be, I guess we know that it will be in the second half of the year, is that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
it'll be earliest July, latest December.
Okay, but it might be June, and they say, hey, by the way, it's going to be next month?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
So we have to be able to just be committed to rolling out those activities and making sure that everybody is getting quality content. Lots of ways. Eric took charge of developing the equipment plan, which is extremely helpful, and just really been a main point of contact, not just for the club, but for other people that we've branched out to. We're interested in inviting folks from Seattle Auxiliary Communication Services or working with local amateur radio distributors to see if they'd be interested in highlighting some aspect of their equipment or whatnot. And so he's been making a lot of connections between me and those other contacts. He's also had a lot of experience working with scouts and the Mountaineers, and so just giving tips and tricks of how to get them interested and establishing the Youth on AirNet so that RDC kids can see that other kids outside the Science Center are also using amateur radio if they're interested in getting their license. Using his daughter as an example a lot has been really cool because then she can come and share her experience, so that's a much closer connection than just hearing about scouts we might never meet. So in all sorts of ways, and it's been extremely helpful.
Yeah, and I guess so Eric mentioned to me that he's meeting with you regularly, is that right?
Yes, every Friday.
Okay, very cool.
We try to combat different issues that come up, like facilities and the roof access, installing the antenna, and then in the future, again, some of that equipment, just various things. So yeah, the main radio that we'll be hoping to use is going to be the ICOM 9700. And what's really awesome about ICOM is that they're a local business. And so that was a contributing factor as to why we decided to use that. And we're trying to use as many components from ICOM as we can, but they don't distribute everything. For the antenna, we're actually going to be attempting to build it ourselves within Tinker Tank.
Wow.
So one department that's been involved through this proposal process is called Digital Discovery Workshops. And they film digital workshops in their digital lab downstairs, and they distribute them to classrooms on our YouTube channel. And they're granting us access to their lab so that we can film our own workshops. So if we go through with building this antenna, we're going to be filming the whole process and distributing it on YouTube as like a, here's how we prepared for our ARIS contact, and try to do as much of it on site as possible. So that would be really exciting, and our plan is if we can't really build it and have it up and running by June, we'll go with a commercial one. And we've got that backup option for sure. But we're gonna have a 2-meter Yagi and a 70-centimeter Yagi.
Great, so it'll be Yagi, that's fantastic.
Yes,
okay.
Yep. However, if we are building our own, one consideration we've made based on some information we got from Will was a helix antenna, a 2-meter helix antenna with like a spiral coil.
Oh, sure.
So. Yeah. So we've got the primary station, and we also have a backup station, and that's required from ARIS, and they also require but request that you do as many test runs as possible with your primary station leading up, making sure that everything is working, you've problem solved everything. Also test your backup station just in case. We've also got a landline just in case. So they really, really, really want to make sure that everybody's selected contacts are successful. And we would use slightly different equipment. So far, our plan is to potentially use Eric's station that he has at home on a loan, since we don't have an intention to use it. But if that's something that we may need to purchase our own, we would probably use similar equipment.
Surely the astronauts are not going to be available for practice runs, right?
So that'll mostly look like using the repeater on the ISS and talking to people through the ISS. And again, the director from ARIS made some great suggestions on how far we can try to extend our reach with those practice runs to really try out the system. So that'll, once we get the antenna installed, we're gonna have everything very easily accessible to pull into the lecture space, but it will not live there. So we'll have to schedule it out. We might invite small groups like the DC cohort to witness these test runs, make it very clear you will not be talking to astronauts because they're very busy people, but we could talk to people all around the world through this repeater. We're very interested in future endeavors, and we're actually going to be using ARIS as a way to gauge interest. If we have a lot of people attend the event and then ask us for resources later, we could potentially provide a sort of workshop style informal education to get them through licensure, or just even tuning a radio to see what they pick up, what they can hear, but without transmitting. So we're definitely considering it, and all of the equipment that we would use in our primary station, we are interested in keeping that as that later permanent station. So we've got this giant curved IMAX screen down at the bottom of the theater, and in between the seats and the screen, that's what's considered our lecture space. So we've got a set of gates that we can move back for people to sit in. There will also be that radio set up for when it's actually being operated. And then
great.
The audience looking up at the screen will have a video of the ISS looking down at Earth, going over its orbit. We're going to have a video of the antenna on the roof actually moving and operating with the rotor control. We're going to have the ISS orbit path like splayed out. The cool thing about Tinker Tank activities is we kind of keep them in a rotation. We don't always bring activities back, but we always have the materials and any sort of like lesson plan available. If somebody's interested in pulling out an activity, we could do it as a short-term like innovation station. We can turn it into a long-term, monthly unfacilitated activity. So all those sorts of activities with antenna building and Fox hunt, we're going to have the equipment ready to use whenever we have a group interested. We're prototyping different types of teaching styles with something like cohorts. So if we do have an amateur radio license cohort where we lead them through licensure, they can access all of those activities. And that's when we can pull in the curriculum from DC if they're willing to share, or from camps. Or each year that camps offers their Mission to Mars camp, the youth in that camp could access a satellite contact by the end of it, even if it's not with astronauts. Number one, we would love for you to attend the event. And also we would love your ideas. I come from an educational background, so I am super comfortable developing all sorts of lessons across all sorts of domains, even if I don't entirely know what I'm talking about. But by the end of it, I will know, hopefully, what I'm talking about as I teach it. So if you have any sort of idea, we thought of potentially developing an emergency skills camp, focusing mostly on amateur radio. We've also thought about, if we do establish a permanent station, having a maker in residence format where we have an amateur radio hobbyist come in, describe their work, and construct an activity themselves with our support and our materials and whatnot. So we would just love to hear, if you do attend the event and you think it's a success and would like to keep going with it, how you want to be involved, because we're really open to a lot right now. PacSci, we are selecting our youth development cohort to be the students that benefit, but we are an all-ages museum. We would love to excite all ages of learners, of curious people with amateur radio. So if the type of programming that West Seattle ARC is looking to do with older audiences, we would be happy to support that or in some way contribute or collaborate as well.